Hey everyone, how's it going? It's nice to be here at IBC and see all your wonderful faces. So yeah, just in case it's not clear, I'm Elly and
I'm
this
Matt.
guy's Matt.
Yes.
And yeah, as Simon said, we do a lot of stuff in the training team, a lot of the hands-on with Maxon workshops, and so we thought, why not, embrace this partnership and do it at IBC as well, live with everyone.
Yeah, so we've got obviously some additions, Cinema 4D 2023 only came out several days ago. So,
Yes.
our previous sessions were, like leveling up with R26, S26, sorry, I've got naming conventions. And now, of course, we've got a few little tips and tricks that we can show you for the new release of 2023. So shall I dive in?
Shall we? Yeah, we've got a lot to cover, I guess.
Yes,
so
I guess. So we're going to have a look at a few things. Cinema 4D and Redshift, as we kind of do. We've got like my little side, and then I hand over to Elly to kind of make things look prettier. So as you can see from our screen here, this is the scene that we're going to kind of be starting to try and recreate. We've got an entire 44 minutes now to get our way through this. So I'll do little bits of the modelling, and then obviously hand over to Elly to do some Redshift stuff.
Yeah.
So let's minimize that.
I love my naming that I've kept as well. Edit version 2 at the end.
Final.
Tell me you're a designer or an artist without telling me you're an artist.
Final.
Everything
final
is saved like
2.
that, right?
Definite. Final. Yeah.
This is the last one.
This is the last one.
Angry emoji.
I just stopped putting the word final and giving numbers. It was far easier because then I just didn't have to worry. So I'm starting with a cube. As you can tell, I am the modeler of the two of us. So just to quickly have a look at creating the spaceship, one of the new fun things that we have in Cinema 4D, which I absolutely love, is the new symmetry hub. It's going to make life so much easier for me when I do anything to do with modeling, because I no longer have to use the symmetry tool. So to start with, I am going to start with a cube, and I'm just going to make it editable with C, for those of you who don't know, so I'm a shortcut person, and then put it in a subdivision surface. No longer do I have to do the symmetry. So it's quite strange, but it is really nice. So to activate the symmetry hub, I can just go up here, my symmetry is on, but I'm just going to give me the hub so I can see where and what planes the symmetry is working on. And for ease of use, I'm just going to dock it so that I can turn things on and off when I want to. So I've already got the planar symmetry on, and I'm already working on the X. So quite simply, it means that I can select one side and it does it the other, and I don't have to do anything else about it. This is more exciting than you can believe after 22 years of Cinema 4D modeling using the symmetry
You're
object.
plugging your history there, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. 22 years is just insane. And you think, how do I get this good in 22 years? Making a cube, it takes time.
Stop showing off.
I'm
okay.
sorry, yeah. So there's just a few things, with the symmetry which makes life easy, because I can select the other side, and selecting. Why is it giving me emojis on your screen?
It's because it thinks I'm working.
Okay.
I love an emoji. I don't know.
Smiley
why.
face. I love it. Go away. Simply selecting the other side, and with tools as well as just like move, scale, and rotate. Simple tools such as inset. Now I can just do one side, and it's doing the other. This is something that I absolutely love. This is something that's made so much sense now when it comes to modeling. So that I can only have to select the ones that I need to, and it will inset both sides. But the fun part about this bit. Well, I'm about to go into proper teaching mode because I'm about to do this. Is that it's treating it as one group as well. That's the other bit that I really like, because it is not seeing them as two separate sides because they are in the middle at the symmetry plane. It is treating them as one whole group, which, like I say, for those of us that have had to think, okay, what have I had to select before, and will this accidentally create things? I don't have to worry about it anymore. Particularly this next bit, where I go to my extrude tool, which is D, and I extrude downwards. Now, for those of you who are used to the symmetry object before, will have known that we would have got this inside seam, which is infuriating, and you have to sit there and you forget that you've done it, and you think, why is my modeling and texturing not working? Turn off symmetry, looking side, and realize you've got this channel going through. So this is instantly much easier and not something I now have to worry about that I've broken and I can get rid of. And then it works across some stuff. So, just simply loop selecting and holding down shift for some nice capsule You know, this is the start of the space. This is the escape pod. It will get bigger from here on in. So just to, you know, continue extruding, you know, what's really nice, I can select this, and if I want to extrude the whole thing, why not increase the planes that I've got? So I can now not only do X, I can do Y as well. So I can then just extrude out as much as I like and give myself some geometry. Now I'm just going to keep extruding because, you know, otherwise things go funny and it never really quite works. So I'm just going to extrude out a little bit. And let's take some of our extrusions and go in funny ways. So I've got that and I've got that both sides. So I'm just going to reference the kind of ship that I had before, and I'm going to extrude, and this time I'm not going to preserve groups, so in theory I can extrude both and extrude up and move and things around. And again, the symmetry is just great, so for even simply rotating, it will rotate all of the objects around and I will get better symmetry, or I should be getting better symmetry. I've got some interesting things happening there. What's going on? Ooh, I found something interesting. So let's select both of those and move those backwards. And then let's rotate those. And you know, and it works with scale as well. So if I'm scaling everything together, or if I just have one selected, I can scale. So I can sort of effectively, what used to be called normal scale, to just simply move things around and just extruding some stuff out. I would love to do a much more complicated... Oh, that's really going crazy, isn't it? What's happening?
It's because we're doing it live.
It's because we're doing it live, aren't we? It's just absolutely ignoring the other side. So let's just...
It's our on teaching moments.
How to get around the things that don't want to behave. We do like doing that, don't we? So
that's what happened yesterday.
It is what happened yesterday. So, although the thing is, this is the workaround. So, what we can do with the hub, in theory, if I go to topology and I go to edge, and I can select these two, and I can define my selection. So, in theory, I should then be able to select the other two, and I can change it because now it is using the internal geometry and the polygon selection as the mirror, entirely on purpose, to give you the ability of moving stuff around. So because you can define where the planes are, you can get around interesting quirks, which is really nice. So just going to scale those down and leave those as is, because that's the strange fish creation plane that I've got. So just really quickly as well, you know, moving those in, and my symmetry hub is on, I'm going to go back to planar, and I'm going to turn off the height because I'm only going to do one side, because I'm now going to do the sort of wings, and I'm just going to extrude. Preserve groups back on, please. Just extruding out, you know, just going to keep extruding, moving down, and you can see that I've got stuff working the other side. Now, one of the things that I would love that it doesn't do at the moment. So if I use my loop selection tool, if I wanted to do, you know, some subdivision surface weighting, can I get that internal loop? Are you going to let me have that internal loop? No. Okay, fine. I'll do this the manual way. So if you want to know how to do that, Control-Shift-Click will allow you to do really quick selections round. Oh, where did that go? And it can get both sides. Now that's the selection tool, and if I use my subdivision surface weighting tool by holding down full stop, it will do one side, but sadly at this point not the other. So there is another tool which we have created for things like this. If I go to my select, we can symmetrize selection, which means that it will take what I've got one side, flip it so that I can, in actual fact, have both, hold down full stop, and then it will allow me to do the weighting on both sides. So there are ways round if the symmetry tool is not being, you know, playing with you with some of the tools. I'm hoping that it's something that, you know, this new symmetry is new. There are loads of things that we can go, oh, this is going to be really cool. What if it did that as well? So it's all going to come. You can see that, my modelling skills know no bounds, and I've got 2 minutes left. So just very quickly, let's just give it some more detail, just give it some more interesting things so Elly can crash it into the ground. So it's fairly simple, but it's really nice. It just makes the process so much smoother than what we've had to do with before. The symmetry object was wonderful, but this is so much faster. This is stuff that you don't have to think about anymore, that's doing what you expect it when you want it. And just, like I say, simple scaling, simple rotating, simple moving, it just works the other side. And with the hub, simply turning it on and off with the butterfly button and defining the selections with X, Y, and Z there. And of course, the fun part, if you are having problems, you can define it, as Jonas has said, on a topological, that's a good word, topological selection, so that you can define where the plane will mirror, will allow you to get around most interesting problems. And that, for me, super fast, is the modelling of my 10-minute spaceship. I have to say, when I look at what I can do in 10 minutes and then I look at what the ZBrush artists can do in 10 minutes, I do kind of go, okay, never mind. But
it's more than what I can do in 10 minutes.
Can they crash it into a ground and render it? That's Elly's job.
That is my sole purpose for today. So I'm gonna take on some of the lighting and texturing and just talk you through. I like quick and easy techniques sometimes. I don't know if I should admit this. I didn't have loads of time to create this render because, as you know, we had a launch last week. So I was thinking of quick ways of making something look good that I can do in literally under an hour. And that's sort of what I'm going to talk about. Again, we're not going to be able to build this entire thing from scratch, unfortunately. But we can talk about how I set up the sky, some of the lighting. We'll talk through the material. So material stacking is a new feature in Redshift. And as you all know, it's something I love to talk a lot about. So let's get into that. Let's dive into how I did some of this stuff. So if I do the whole Blue Peter moment, if you're from the UK, you'll know what that means. It's something I made earlier. And so it uses the model that Matt created originally for me, and he sent this over. Very nice model, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And all I did was, nice and simple, create a landscape. So, plane, displacer, that's what we have going on here. And I've got a texture map inside of here from J. Pierce. I use his displacement maps because they are very nice. And then I subdivided it. And so we've got our landscape and we've got some water here, and that's pretty much the starting point that we're at now. And so once I've created my, really elaborate scene that took me a very long time, I can now start working on my lighting. And we're going to do that in Redshift. And so I think I've already changed my renderer. Yeah, I have. I've already got my renderer set up. So all I need to do is kick off my render view. And so I'm just going to dock that here. So some people work in the IPR, which changes the viewport. I like to work in the render view. And as we can see, it's not really looking very nice at the moment. And that's because we have nothing going on. We've only got our geometry. So my starting point is to create some ambient lighting. And the way I do that is by grabbing a dome light. Straight away, we already get some lighting in here. And the reason I use a dome light, let me just get rid of my symmetry hub, because I don't need that anymore. And pull that up. Cool, yeah, so the reason I use a dome light is you can drop in a HDR image, and we're gonna get some nice lighting around our scene. So the one I ended up using was, I think I found it online.
Not to interrupt you, but is there a reason you'll go for lighting first rather than texturing?
Yes, because if I don't have any lights set up, my materials are always gonna look not so nice, is probably the PC way of saying it live. But I would, refer to it another way if I was at home.
Good tip and trick then. Have lighting first.
Yeah, so I really would have at least majority of my lighting set up before I create materials. Otherwise, it's what we're saying, your materials won't look that nice, and so why spend all that time tweaking them to then do your lighting and then go, hey, actually those materials look totally different.
Yeah.
So I think this is the HDR I ended up with. I think I found it on HDRI Haven, which is a nice resource to grab HDRIs. So all I'm going to do is drag and drop that into my texture input on my dome light. Cool, now straight away we've got some relatively nice lighting considering we have used a single light. And so what we can do, we can actually rotate this around so we can cast some really nice shadows going on. We can even color correct our dome light. So we can come in, and I did some of this, but because we're tight for time, I'm not really going to worry about dialing that in too much. I'd rather show and talk about the techniques. But the trouble is with the dome light is you can only rotate the dome light. We can't move it up and down because it's like an infinite light and an environment. So if I try to move this up and down, you'll notice nothing happens, but I want to be able to see a lot more of perhaps a different part of this HDR in the background. And so there's, as we said, quick and easy or quick and dirty tricks and techniques is something that I like to do.
Efficient, I believe. Yeah.
Efficient.
Time
efficient.
efficient.
I think because Redshift is very technical. Some people worry that that they focus too much on the technical side of things, which is great, and I like to talk about that stuff as well. But sometimes it's nice to know that you can just kind of dive in and be like, hey, how can I do this thing quickly? And so what I actually did, I ended up using a plane, and I used a bend deformer, and I put the HDR image on the plane and then had total control of the background. So if I just quickly set this up.
So a fake background of the fake background to give you more control.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my plane, I'm going to make it a child of my camera, and I'm going to zero out my coordinates. This is so it's going to perfectly be in line with the way that my camera's facing.
And it means no matter where we then move the camera, the plane is always behind us, or behind the camera in the viewport, so that we can always see where it's going. So it doesn't matter where we're looking around, it's kind of always fixed in the way for us.
Exactly. So now if I just move this to the back.
Like a constant fake green screen.
And I'm going to need to make it a little bit bigger, because as we can see, 400 by 400 is absolutely not big enough. Right, size-wise, something like that, something like that. Cool, so we now have our plane, which has now effectively become our background. So all it needs to do now is create a material that has that same HDR texture on, and I'm going to be able to see it. This is cutting in and out a little bit.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So let me create a Redshift standard material. Open that up, and I'm going to drop in my same texture. Throw that in there. Connect that to my base color. I'm also going to connect it to my emission color, because naturally, our sky is going to be slightly emissive.
So the emissions will give out some form of light, so you'll get a little bit more boost as well as the HDRI doing its thing.
Exactly, but I don't want too much, so I want it to be more. The guys like Charles and Andy earlier were talking about like creating mood with lighting, and this is nowhere near that ability. But we can actually look at mood and the time that our scene is, and so we want to try and match that lighting as much as we possibly can. So let me throw that on my plane. And now we have this here, and it's not really looking that great, so I'm going to bend it around so it looks a little bit more sort of realistic. And there's a few ways, like we spoke about this yesterday. You can do it with you could do spline wrap, you could do the actual wrap. But me, nice and simple, I'm going to use a bend deformer. So I'm going to throw that onto my plane. I'm just going to go to, I think it's plus X, fit to parent, and then move this down.
Slightly curve it round.
Slightly curve it round, and then I just got to do a little bit of rotation on here. Maybe something like 20. Cool. From here, if I sort of like switch this off, so it's the same HDR, but we're now able to define exactly which bit of it shows in my background. So I can now use my like move, scale, rotate.
And more importantly, vertically.
Exactly, vertically. So I can reposition this, and I don't want to spend too much time tweaking this, but this is what I did. This is how I created that nice background without having to worry about having to actually physically create clouds and create the sun and stuff like that.
It's one of the questions that we get asked quite a bit as well, as like, how do you make realistic looking clouds? And a lot of the time it's, we cheat. We have pictures of realistic looking clouds and depth of field.
And that's the thing. So Vlad was saying on his presentation, if you guys were here, he's like, bokeh and depth of field save you so much. And so when I add some on here, you're not even going to know that it's just kind of like a bit of a dodgy plane in the background. And what I've done, I've still sort of matched it to the rotation of the dome light. That's important. Because if the sunlight was coming from this direction, but then I've got like the sun in the background from this direction, it's all going to look a little bit messed up. So I'm still matching the direction of my light. And the final thing I did to have a little bit more light, because we don't see too many details and I want a few more shadows, is for a start, I actually dropped the intensity of this down so it looks a little bit of a sort of like a moodier scene. And then I threw in a infinite light and then just rotated this to cast some nice shadows. Ooh. Let me try and match this. It is very hard on this screen.
Tiny screen.
Teeny tiny screen. I'm used to working with an iMac. Hang on, let me actually zero this out.
Can you do F1 and give yourself a bigger...
Yeah, let's get in here.
There we go.
So I can just sort of rotate this and again, just create some nicer shadows that are also going to be cast, because our sun's setting as well, so we want sort of like a darker scene. Let's go to there. Again, don't want to spend too much time on this.
Lovely.
Because that's what I do, I can sit and I can tweak for ages, but I'm not going to do that. So this was the lighting setup. So as we saw, like, quick, easy, looks nice, like if we sort of just disable these and maybe disable this. So we've gone from that in the space of what, like 8 minutes to get some relatively nice lighting.
And 3 objects, yeah. It's
and
amazing
3 objects,
the difference
yeah, 3
that lighting can do to a scene.
Yeah, and so if I'm tight for time or we're doing something like a daily or just want to create like a nice composition, we can start with some initial lighting. So that's the lighting that I did. And now let's move on to a little bit of texturing. So again, my Blue Peter moment, here's one I made earlier. And it's the same setup that we've basically just created, the infinite light, the dome light, and the plane in the background. And it's already got some of our textures in. So if I kick this off, I'll talk through a few of these textures because, again, nice and simple. So we have our water. So if I open up my water, as we can see, we haven't got a lot of nodes going on. So for anyone who's new to Redshift, Redshift uses a node-based material system, which is very different, obviously, to Cinema 4D. But we haven't got a lot going on. We've got our standard material, which is a new way of building materials inside of Redshift. We can define our base properties in here. So we can see we've got a diffuse color. This is how much I've kind of cheated. We've not got any transmission. So it's water, but it's
not see-through.
It's actually not see-through. So we could even have a little bit of transmission in there, make it look maybe a little bit more realistic, a little bit of see-through. But I was just using reflection and then I changed it to be like a bluey color. This might end up looking a little bit nicer.
That's cool.
And then all it is a Maxon noise that is defining our displacement, which is creating those ripples. And again, didn't spend too much time dialing that in. Just thought, hey, it looked quite nice like that. So these are the materials that I set up, and then we're going to actually build the like the metal paint one that's on the plane. And then again, the ground, just for the sake of showing everything, is a series of texture maps. So I use Ambient CG. They're like a royalty-free website where you can download, I think, between 2K and 8K texture maps. Yeah, and it's royalty-free, and so I like to use it because I like to try and give away as many of my project files as I can, especially because majority of what I do is for training and demos, and so if I can give out project files without having to worry about removing materials, then so Ambient CG. So yeah, that's all this is. It's a ground texture. We've got our color, ambient occlusion, which are going into a color composite. We've then got our roughness, normal, and displacement. Again, nice and relatively simple. So the material that we're going to create is going to be the metal on here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the material. But what we're going to do, I created a procedural rust, and I also created a sort of like a metal pane, and I've blended them together. We're not going to do that whole process, because if I open up this node tree, you'll see we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to focus on this top area here, which is just like this metal paint panels, whereas the rust, for anyone who would like to see, is a whole bunch of Maxon noises blended together in a bump in a color layer to create this rusty looking material here, and then we've blended it together. As we said, we haven't got the time to go through that.
No, but then we will look at the material stacking system, which will allow us to add the graffiti on top of, which is something that's new in the latest version of Redshift.
We will. Okay, so let's kick this off. Let's create a new material and let's see how far we get with this. So we want to create a standard material. Actually, I'm going to create 2 because I'm going to do the glass as well. So let's throw that on my ship. And I've already set up some polygon selections. So I grabbed this little area here, which I thought would be the glass. Otherwise, you know, maybe that's why they crashed. Maybe
Yeah,
they
couldn't see through.
Maybe we wouldn't do the glass. And then we've got the rest of the body. And this is important because when it comes to material stacking and we're using polygon selections, so normally we wouldn't need the remaining body, right? But because we're going to use material stacking, we have to be telling Cinema 4D that, okay, the other stuff is a polygon selection as well. I came across that when I was trying this out. So for anyone who's wondering why, I've also got all, that is why. Okay, so let's grab our glass in here. And let's just, again, I don't even need to open my node editor. I can just straight away come in, increase my transmission, which is my refraction, so create some nice glass. And I'm going to go thin-walled, which is basically telling Cinema 4D and Redshift that the object that it's on, or the geometry it's on, has no thickness, so we get this nice clear glass without me worrying about any refraction. And let's throw this one on, and again, put it on the O. Cool, so let's build this up from scratch. And so one thing I do like to do, a lot of the time when I teach Redshift, there's like the way to do things in what people class as the correct way. So when you have texture maps, it's like, okay, the albedo or diffuse goes into the base color, the roughness goes into your reflection roughness. That is like the physically accurate way of doing things. Sometimes I like to break the rules because that's apparently what I do, even as a trainer. And so I like to take different texture maps and I like to blend them together to create my own version of materials.
Thinking outside the box.
Yes. So if I grab, what do I need? This one, my little textures. So let me get this and open this up. So let's hide that for now, we don't do that. So this is a concrete slab roughness texture. And so originally, this would have been made up of like 5 different textures with our base color, and it creates a nice concrete floor that looks lovely. But I thought, hey, you know what? This actually looks like it could be metal panels that make up a ship. And so this is what I mean by thinking out the box and maybe like breaking the rules. You don't necessarily have to do things in the way that they should be done, because at the end of the day, it's the end result. If it looks good, and for me, I did it, and I thought it looked all right. So that's the main thing. At the end of the day, we're trying to make nice looking art. We're creative people. We're, like, if we go the wrong way about it, but it looks good,
that's what we do.
Who cares? So let me just throw that in. Let me throw it in my roughness map. And I got the same. I used the same concrete as the normal, just to create some like bump as well. And if I just solo this inside my node editor, I can see how it's projecting. And as we can see, it's not really projecting very well. And I don't really want to have a faff with UVs because, again, I want this to be done nice and quick. So in Redshift, there's a nice little workaround. If I grab a triplanar and I connect this into my triplanar image X, it's effectively going to ignore my UVs and it's going to try and project this texture correctly. As we can see, it's now projecting it nice and correctly. All I'm going to do now, if I just remap this and scale it down. So I'm scaling down, which is kind of up our texture map. We now have this roughness going over here. And you're probably thinking, Elly, that's looking a little bit strange. I know, bear with me. So from this point, I'm going to come back to my standard material and I'm going to start to set up a few base properties. So depending on the material that I'm creating, I'm going to need to make sure I match these properties. So for example, if I'm creating a metal material, I'm going to want to increase my metalness values, or if I'm creating a glass material, we do transmission, etc. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to dial in a couple of these settings and then maybe have a little bit of roughness. Because I'm going to create what is going to look a little bit like a rusted, scratched, red paint texture. That was a lot of words. And so this is fine for now. I'm not worried about adjusting my base color in here because I'm actually going to use this roughness map inside of a color composite and do some magical blending like I do in Photoshop and use that as my base color. So let's do that. Let's create our base color. So it's looking a little bit, it's not looking great at the moment. So if I get a color composite, that one here, what this allows me to do, if I get my attributes, I can define a base color, a blend color, and my composite mode, which is my blend mode. And what's great is we have a whole variety. So if you're used to working in Photoshop or used to working with blending modes, you'll know what a lot of these do. And they can create some really interesting and artistic results. So my base color is going to be the base metal or paint of this ship. So if we do a little bit like a rusty red, plug that into my base color.
And then, ta-da.
And so now we have that going on. And now what I can do, I can use that into my blend color. And then I'm going to mess with some of my blending modes.
You're disappearing.
I can hear it cutting it out. Right, so the one I'm going for is going to be dodge. And this is going to create a really cool, what I think, it's all artistic, kind of...
Subjective.
It's all subjective, yeah. So what I think looks quite nice, it looks like scratched rust. And again, because we're at sort of like a relatively like big distance away, we can get away with this looking like rust. And all we've done is like composited a few colors and a concrete roughness map into here. And then I'm going to do a similar thing. So I'm going to grab again the color composite, and I'm going to plug my first slot into the base color of this one. And I'm going to duplicate, running out of space. I'm going to duplicate my roughness and my triplanar. All I'm going to do is offset this slightly because I don't want them to be mapping on top of each other in the same place. And so if I just, change my offset slightly, I can then use this again in my second color composite. And again, mess with my blending modes. I'm going to go with multiply.
And we should.
When it kicks in,
Wait.
we have a relatively nice sort of painted metal that looks a little bit rough and rusty. And then again, to add just some of that detail so it looks a little bit more like marks or scratches and metal panels, I can use my normal, plug that into a bump map, connect that to my input, and then just make sure that goes into my bump map. On the original one, I actually used the roughness map and blended some stuff together just to sort of explain a bit more detail. Yeah, so I like how this is looking, and this is pretty much, if we cut back to the original one, this is pretty much, if we ignore the rust, the setup that we just created, this one here, then we use the normal. As I was saying, we did do a bit of like bump blending as well for a little bit more additional detail, but this is the whole thing that we just created, and it's a really nice sort of metal rough texture that uses some concrete texture maps. Okay, so let's not show that one. Okay, right, so far we've done some really quick lighting and we've done some really quick texturing, which is similar to the original sort of shot that we ended up with. From here, we can now use material stacking, which, as Matt was saying, is a new feature that came with Redshift and C4D 2023, like on Wednesday?
Yes, Wednesday.
And it's going to allow us to add stickers, decals, all of that great stuff really, really quickly and easily, instead of having to worry about texture remapping, which can be a little bit of a time-consuming process before, and I speak from experience because I've done it quite often. So what we can do, we're going to add some graffiti here. We're going to use Redshift. We're going to use Cinema 4D's texture mode to reposition them. One thing, so I got the guy's name here. So Anton Nikolaev has online a free graffiti and decal pack. If I find exactly where that is, so like shout out to him because they're completely like commercial royalty free to use. And so there are these packs here. If I just sort of...
Thank you, Anton.
Yeah, cheers, Anton. You have saved me here because I was thinking this is going to take a lot of time to create some of my own. So how do I make these a little bit bigger for everybody to see?
Like that.
Okay, yeah, so it's two different packs of a whole bunch of different graffiti PNGs. And so they look something like this. The downside is material stacking. You can stack at the moment up to 6 materials. And I was thinking, okay, well, I've already got 2 on there. I've got the glass, I've got the rusted metal paint. So if I can only do 4 of these other like graffiti tags or PNGs, it's not going to really cover a whole surface. And if you think about like dystopian and like grungy kind of scenes, they have this stuff everywhere. They've got graffiti all over the walls, all over like any of the geometry that you're creating. And so I thought, okay, a little workaround. Maybe I'll throw a bunch of them together inside of Photoshop and create my own like larger decals. And so instead of having to worry about having individual ones, I just created 3 that look something like this, and they're literally just taking the same. What one haven't I got? 3. Yeah, it's just taking, like, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those PNGs, throw them in here, saving it as a PNG again so I can split out my alpha, and then now I don't have to worry about the fact that I can only add 4 more materials. So let's throw on a couple of these, because we've still got some time.
I was just thinking I could do that.
Yeah? Cool, we can do that. So let me just kick this off. So we'll do it in here, we'll do it in the same scene. And I'm going to come into Redshift. And so what we have to do, so before, inside of our material, we would throw in our PNG, we'd split our alpha, and we'd do some material blending and texture remapping. Now, I don't even need to worry about coming into this material anymore. That's done. And I'm going to come into this one here.
So for those of us who are used to Cinema 4D's old previous system, it's the case of being able to just layer up a whole load of material tags at the end of your object and work like we did before.
Yes. Cool, so I've thrown in one of my graffiti decals, and all I need to do is plug it into my color, and then because it's a PNG, I can use a color splitter, which is a node that's going to allow me to split out the alpha, and I can use that as my opacity map. And it's basically going to get rid of all the other stuff that we don't need.
So effectively, we're just left with the graffiti and the background is taken away.
That was the technical term, all the stuff that we don't need. Cool, right, so I've got my graffiti set up with my alpha. I'm going to throw it onto my ship. And if we come into here, we can see it's already sort of doing something. But I want to be able to use texture mode and control and define where I'm going to place it. And Matt's also going to show us a little trick to use the placement tools after. What I want to do is I'm going to change my projection mode to flat. I can then grab my texture mode. I can then reposition this. If we actually come out of our camera, it might be a little bit easier to see. I can now rotate this and I can reposition my graffiti on here. And you're probably thinking, Elly, it's looking a little bit strange. And I'd agree with you. And that's because I need to make sure I switch off tiling. So I only want to have the one projection on here. So I can switch that off. And now we have our graffiti that I can reposition around here.
Sweet.
And place it exactly where I want. Or
we have a little bit of an interesting trick for you. So we were playing with something earlier and we've discovered that we can use what is Cinema 4D's new dynamic placement tools to place the texture dynamically at different angles where we are using a teeny tiny bit of espresso.
And we do have to credit the man himself, Mr. Jonas Pills,
thank you.
If he is here, because he helped
finalised
us
it for us, yeah.
Figure out how to do this.
So the first thing I need to do is create a small null object, which is fine, and it's dependent very much so on the parent of the object that it's trying to work with. So the first thing I actually have to do is make it a child of the subdivision surface and then reset my transform so it becomes part of, you know, the coordinates of my ship, which I can't actually find. Where is it? Where is my null?
But not.
Oh, it's because I'm on texture tool.
Yeah.
Rookie mistake. So I've got my null that is now...
Teaching moment.
That teaching
Remember,
moment, yes.
It's always a teaching moment.
Set up
That's what
entirely
we say.
for that reason.
Yeah.
So I simply have this null object that is now set to the correct transforms of its children, of its parents, sorry. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my tag, and that's the one that I need to know that I'm working, because that's the graffiti one. So with my null, I'm going to right-click on my positions, expressions, set driver, and then in the coordinates of the ship of the graffiti texture, right-click on this expressions, set driven absolute, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. You can see it's already pinged back to where it was before. I'm going to right-click on the expressions set driver again for the null for there, and then right-click and set driven absolute here. And then I need to make sure I go to my object mode, we go to our placement tools, we're on normal and render instance, and then it doesn't matter where I put it, it will match the interesting sort of planar rotation
I think this is so cool.
of that. So I am technically using the dynamic placement tools to reposition textures. And of course you can then stack up to three more textures.
We could do
so
three more.
If you've got a couple more graffiti things that you wanted to be able to put on, or a couple of different materials that you had for specific elements, then you could do that as well. And we've got 4 minutes.
Well, I was thinking maybe I'll quickly do the grass.
Yeah, do it. We've
Why
got 4
not?
minutes.
Let's kill 4
4
minutes.
whole minutes left.
We can't underrun. Those aren't the rules.
No. We only ever
Over.
expand our time.
Cool. So let's very quickly, as a last or final bit, I'm going to show you how we created the grass inside of here and how we use the same displacement map with a little bit of layering to define the areas where we do or do not have either our clones or our matrices, depending on the way you want to work. So let's cut back into this guy here. And I'm actually going to grab my grass elements. So these are all from the asset browser, but for convenience, I'm just going to copy and paste. So let me throw these into here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab I'm going to have to remember where this is now. RS matrix.
You should just be able to do matrix because you're in render.
Oh,
it's
is that
own
true?
thing. So one of the things I have to say I really love about the continue integration with, is it not?
No. Matrix scatter, there we go.
Is the fact that stuff that we used to have
I'd
in a
know
separate Redshift window is now somewhere easily to be found within Cinema 4D's general menu system.
Cool, so I've got my RS matrix, which I've just changed to object mode, and I'm going to throw my subdivision surface on there because I want to clone these grass elements onto here. And I'm going to go with 100,000.
Good grief.
And so again, as I have been told by Thanos, that you can do this with the cloner in multi-instance mode, and 100,000 still handles it perfectly fine. And as a quick trick, just for anyone who doesn't know, because I also didn't know this, you can swap your cloner matrix, which I think is a really great tip. But for now, let me just finish off setting this up. So 100,000 matrices, we can see they're all over our scene here, but we've got nothing in our render view. And so if I come into my Redshift object tag, we have a particle mode, and we can do a bunch of different things. We could set it to sphere instances, and now each of those little matrices in my viewport is now going to be rendered as a sphere. If I increase them, you'll be able to see.
As I said, tiny spheres.
There they are. But what we can do, we can come into mode and we can go custom objects, and now we can tell Redshift and tell Cinema 4D what objects we want these matrices to be rendered as. And in my case, it's going to be these grass elements. So if I just come down, grab all of these, drop them inside of here, and we take a look at our render view, we still can't really see anything. So let me increase these just a little. And I need to adjust my rotation. So let's see if I get this the right way around. There we go. So I've just adjusted my rotation, and now we have all our grass elements. However, it looks a little bit strange because we've got some grass coming out of the water. We only want it on our landscape. So a nice little trick, because we're using a displacement map, so if you were using a noise in your landscape or your displacement, you could do the same thing. But for me, because I'm using a displacement map, I can use that same one to define the areas that do and do not have matrices or grass elements on. So what I'm going to do, let me just grab a plane, and I'm going to scale everything down by a value of uniform minus one. And everything disappears. That's great. That's kind of what we want, because now we can bring it back. And the way we bring it back is by using a field. So the field is going to define where this effect is and isn't having a effect on our matrices. So if I throw in a shader field, I can actually now throw in that same texture map or displacement map that we used at the beginning with the plane. Don't need that. But now what we need to do, we need to actually make some adjustments to this. We need to adjust our black and white values because we're not really getting the result that we're hoping for. So if I throw this into a layer, I can then colorize this. And so as we can see, everything that's black isn't being affected by the plane effector, and everything that is white will be affected. So if I just add in some white handles and a black handle,
it allows us to slightly adjust the image that we're already using to define where the sort of darker areas are and how far they expand, so that we get some more definitive differentiation between the black and the white areas to give us the pond and the land, basically.
Exactly. So now if I'd spent some more time tweaking this, you'll see that we don't have these grass elements in the water because we've been able to use that texture map. That was a little bit too far. Let's pull that back over. Something like this.
And in 46 minutes, we recreated the scene.
Pretty much. Cool, yeah. So thanks so much, everyone.